So the Maamar continues and I say, V'yesh leimar, shezeh ma shekos v'ad merazak, min yifach ba'apam nishmas chayim, sheb'chinas neficha b'kayach kaviyachol. You could say that this is what the Alter Rebbe means when he says that about v'yifach ba'apav, the Eibishter blew into the person, into Adam, the neshama, that it's neficha b'kayach. He emphasizes that it's blowing with might. This only further underscores the point that we just made in Eis Dalet, that the neshama is mushish vayifach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that the kayach that a yid has to be able to bring zeh hayom tchilas maasecha, to bring the zeh even into the world, into the kay, into the maasecha, is because the neshama is rooted in atzmos. And you see this from Vayipach Ba'apav Nishbas Chaim and the Nafach Miteiche Nafach. He says this is further highlighted by the fact that it has to be Neficha B'Kayach, that it has to be blowing with energy, blowing hard. Why? Because the Sheidish HaNeshama B'Chines Helam Atzmi, because the root of the Neshama is not just concealed, is not just something that has to be brought into being, but it's bringing something into being from Helam Atzmi, from an essential concealment. Helam Sheina B'Metzias. There's two types of being concealed, as we'll see. There's something that exists, but you don't see it, and there's something that's hidden because it doesn't exist yet. To draw something down from a helam, where it's not just concealed, but it's concealed because it doesn't exist yet, takes a lot of work, takes hard toil, and that takes the neficha b'kayach. Why? To draw something down from a concealment, but that it already exists, it's just concealed, you don't need to work so hard. For instance, what's the example of Halam Shiashnim b'mitzios? A flame that's in a that's connected to a coal, right? So the coal is glowing, the coal is hot, but there's no flame that's actually showing, and you want to make it flame up. Over there, it doesn't take so much work. Why? Because since there is a mitzias of eish, there is a mitzias of fire already, but it's just that it's not being revealed, it's contained within the coal, so that's a halam shiashne b'mitzios. Therefore, you're able to bring out that flame from the coal, from the piece of wood, from the burning thing, without working too hard. You just have to blow on it, fan it, etc. But to draw something down from a concealment that totally doesn't exist yet, that takes a lot of work. It takes hard toil. The same mashal, the fire that you're trying to bring out from a flintstone. In other words, you have to strike the stone and create the fire. It's also behelim. Their fire is contained in a concealed fashion. In other words, the potential for fire is contained already in the flintstone. Nonetheless, since the fire in the flintstone is not there at all, it's concealed, but it's not that it's there and it's concealed. It's not there at all, it's alam shenim mitzias. In order to bring out fire, you can't bring out fire without hitting it. Dafka working hard. And as this is all explained in the Maamar of the Rabbi Rashab. That's why the Alter Rebbe says that is dafka blowing with might. Why? Because we're being mamshich something, being mamshich the neshama from a helam shein mitzias. Because the way the neshamas are rooted, the root of the neshamas is not just that it's there and it's concealed in such a way that it doesn't exist yet. It's contained only in potential, in the tzur, in the flintstone. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Lekut Tzayra, when it says about the level of tshuva, that the ruach, that the neshama is returning to Elikim Asher Nesana, to God from where it was given, the b'chinis Elikim Asher Nesana, she sheirish neshama, b'chinis zu nitna neshama beifin nesina, the chol haneisen b'ayin yafo neisen, b'chinis tzur, that Elikim Asher Nesana, the level of Elikus from where the neshama was given, meaning the root of the neshama, and it's giving. Kol haneisen, anybody who gives by in yafa. The neshama is being given in a full way from there. It's like a flintstone. It's concealed completely within it, just in a potential that it doesn't actually exist as an independent entity yet. Therefore, in order to be mamshich the neshama from the atzmos, from its original sheidish alikimash nesana, which is a helam shein b'mitzias, it takes neficha b'kayach, it takes blowing with might. Well, yes, the sheidish nish b'sisrael b'atzmusi is barach lechem yichatam lam shapeilam kili atzmus erin seif. So again, back to the point of Eis Dalet, why, and Eis Gimel, why is a yid have the kayach of zeh hayom tchilas maasecha, to be mamshich gilui of atzmus erin seif in ilamis, in the world itself, because the neshama is mushrish and atzmus, and you see this also in Vayifach Ba'apav, there has to be naficha b'kayach because Talam Shenem Mitzias. Therefore, a yid is the one. The Olam Amiloi Nivra, the world was created perfectly. That's only godliness as it's contained within Medida V'Agbala, within the limitations of the world. A yid on the Yom B'Rei Adam Arishan on Rosh Hashanah Zeh Hayom, then you're able to bring about the Zeh into Tchilas Maasecha. A yid's able to be mamshich Erin Seif Habeligvul into the world because we're mushrish and atzmos. That all is explaining why a yid has the kayach to be mamshich the revelation of atzmos erin seif. But still, what we didn't explain, we explained why a yid, if a yid is mushrish and atzmos, then it makes sense that we're able to bring about a revelation of atzmos erin seif. But what gives us the kayach to bring that into the world? Zeh tchilas maasecha, to bring that revelation into the world itself, that the zeh is drawn down into the kay. So he says this, that we're able to do that. Chibur b'chinas zeh b'chinas kay, to actually connect the zeh with the kay. Yesh leimar shu al yidei shemamshichim gilui nishmasam b'gufam. How does that happen? Because we have a neshama that's moshe shnatzmas, but the neshgili of the neshama, we reveal the neshama in the guf, and once we reveal the neshama in the guf, that now gives us the kayach to reveal that essence of the neshama, the atzmos, into elam. Why? Because a person's guf, like we said before, a person's body is created from the earth, from the ground, which was created on Chaf Hei Elul, created already in the beginning of Ma'aseh Bereishis. That's the level of kai. By effecting a revelation of godliness in our own bodies, that gives a yid the kayach to draw that gilui, to draw that revelation of godliness into the world as well. In the same measure that a person behaves, that's the way it's measured to him. So therefore, by a person doing this within himself, that he reveals the zeh, the neshama, that's moshish and atzmos in the guf, which is created in kai, which is part of the world. So when we do that within ourselves, that's what gives us the ability to draw the revelation of the level of zeh into the kai of the whole world. Like you see by Adam Rishon already in the beginning of creation, on the first Rosh Hashanah, that Adam Rishon says to all of creation, "Come, let's bow down, let's bend the knee." Let's prostrate ourselves. Let's bend the knee before the Eibishter who made us. In other words, on the very first day, that's why we say L'chun Aranana every Friday night to commemorate that first day of creation, that first Rosh Hashanah. The fact that Adam Rishon was able to peil this bittul in all of creation, not just in himself, was al yedei pulas habittul ba'atzmai. By him being peil that bittul in himself, that's what gives him the ability to be mamshich that bittul into the world. Ukepirush nishtachva, like you see this in the pasuk itself, that it says nishtachva v'lei hishtachavu. He says, "Come, let us bow down." He doesn't say to the rest of creation, "You should bow down." He says, "Let's bow down." In other words, it starts with him bowing down. Hainu shegam hu atzmai yishtachva. It starts with Adam Rishon himself also bowing down, being bebittel, and therefore he's able to pile that bittel in the world. So to explain this further, the fact that we're able to be mamshech elokus into the world is through first drawing the elokus into our own bodies. So that also we'll see in the name Adam. What is the name Adam? Adam comes from the word Adam. Adam eleli, and I will be comparable to the supernal, to the divine. Now that idea of Adam being Adam eleli isn't just the neshama that's created as that's banim matam lavai lekechem, but in the guf of the person also. Like it says in the pasuk, Nasa Adam kedmuseinu. The Eibishter says, let's make a person in our form. That's talking about the guf. Just like by the guf of Adam Rishon, the first man, that the Eibishter himself formed him. The same is true, similarly at least, by the guf of each and every Yid. Because as we said before, every Yid is called Adam. Why is he called Adam? Because of Adam Rishon. The fact that every Yid is called Adam because of Adam Elyon would be comparable to the Eibishter. Bein mitzad nishmase, bein mitzad gufay, both mitzad is neshama. And mitzad go and mitzad is gof. When you nitzchi shein shayich beishinui, this is an eternal thing. This isn't something that changes. So us now is just as much as Adam Rishon as in the very beginning of creation. Like it says in the pasuk Vatam Tilu Mamlechas Kainim v'Gai Kaddish, that Yidden we're told will be for the Eibishter Mamlechas Kainim and a holy nation. You could say, says the Rebbe, that what's Mamlechas Kainim? That's the neshama, but the Gai Kaddish is the body. But in both of them it says, you will be for me. And as it says elsewhere, that anywhere it says li in izaz leilam, it never changes. So therefore, the relationship of a Yid to the Eibishter, and not only of a Yid to the Eibishter, but of the body of a Yid to the Eibishter, isn't only once upon a time, but continues always. Because Adam Rishon has this inyan of being Yitzir Kap of Shalakadosh Baruch Hu, being the Eibishter's own creation. And therefore, each and every one of us, our guf also has this inyan that it's in Dugmas Adam Aleli, and it's comparable to the divine, and it's Yitzir Kap of Shalakadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, we have the ability to draw the Gili of Elokus the way it is, and safe, completely beyond the Ilamis, completely beyond any limitation. We're able to draw that revelation of godliness into our own guf, and because we have the kayach to do it in our guf, we have the kayach to do it in the world as a whole as well. This is the continuation of the pasuk. Why? Because it's a chak for the Yidden, it's a chayik mishpat lelekei Yaakov. What does that mean? The milas ki pirush anisinas tama mashakadam lemer zayim tchilas masecha. If it says ki chakli Yisrael, that means this is the reason why Zayim Tchilas Masecha is because chakli Yisrael u'mishpat lelekei Yaakov. What does that mean? This that Zayim Tchilas Masecha, that a person has the ability to connect the Zeh, the revelation of godliness of Atzmos and Seif, with the Kai, with the world, within a person. And it's because it exists that Neshama is able to be expressed in the Guf. Therefore, he's able to bring the Zeh into the Kai of the world also. How do we do that? It's through his Aveda, learning Torah, fulfilling mitzvahs. Why? Because the involvement in Torah is primarily related to the Neshama, which is the Zeh. And fulfilling mitzvahs, which are enclosed in physical things, primarily relates, and its purpose is primarily for the refinement of the body. Through the Aveda of Torah mitzvahs till they become one thing, because one helps the other. That's what gives us the ability to be mamshich the neshama into the guf, to be mamshich the zeh, that's moshe shenatzmos into the kai, into the physical reality. That's the meaning of the second half of the pasuk. Because it's a chayk for the Yidden. That's the Torah that we learn. That's the mitzvahs that we learn. Come before the Melukat Torah, as the Alter Rebbe explains Melukat Torah. That's why chak relates to Yisrael and mishpat to Yaakov. Why? The B'Torah chayk Eimer Yisrael mitzvahs mishpat Eimer Yaakov. Because that in Torah it says Yisrael, in mishpat in mitzvahs it says Yaakov. Because Torah is primarily understanding. Therefore it relates to Yisrael, which is the Shem HaMayla of Yidden, which is the letters of Li Rosh, my head, because it relates to Meichin. Mitzvahs, on the other hand, relate more to Yaakov because they're the action the person does. That's the heel of the person. The Gam Yaakov who Hashem Yadi is Chezes Ba'akev, right? The Yaakov also isn't also from the word Akev, but it's because his hand is holding on to the heel of Esav. And that relates to the idea that mitzvahs are enclosed dafk in the lowest, in the Gashmius of the physical world, the lower world, that there's nothing lower. So this is the taich in the pasuk. The chak Yisrael mishpat lelekei Yaakov v'nesinas tam al zeh hayom tchilas maasecha. That chak Yisrael mishpat lelekei Yaakov, which was, as we said, is Torah and mitzvahs, is the reason why it's able. It's giving the reason for why hayom tchilas maasecha. Haynadam shachas v'giliatz v'serin sev zeh ba'ila maasecha al yedei adam shenivra b'ayim. That why is Hayom Tchilas Maasecha? In other words, why is Hayom, is the person who's created on Rosh Hashanah able to bring about able to bring about the revelation of Atzmas and Seif into Maasecha, into the Ilam, into the world, is Al Yidei Chak Yisrael Mishpat Lelekei Yaakov Limadat Torah V'Kiyama Mitzvahs. How do we do that? Through Torah and Mitzvahs. Okay, so Zayin basically explained that what we explained, Zayim Tchilas Maasecha, that a Yid has Bekayach because he's Mamshich the Neshama into the Guf. So the Neshama that's Mushish and Atzmos, the Zeh is brought into the Kai. Therefore, we're able to bring that Gilui of Zeh into the world as a whole, and that's the taich of Zayim Tchilas Maasecha. So the end of the pasuk is Ki Chak Yisrael Mishpat Lelekei Yaakov. How do we achieve that? Through Torah and Mitzvahs, Chak Yisrael and Mishpat for Yaakov. So with this we could explain what Binyan Malchus is all about. We know that in Rosh Hashanah there's a build-up of Malchus. Just like on Rosh Hashanah the first time, and the day Adam Rishon was created, what happened on the first day of creation? The first day of creation of Adam went to all of the Nivraim and said, "Bayunishtach v'v'nichra." Zeh ma'ashamra Adam Rishon asa shir shliyim vav v'ayim malach gayis lavish. And Adam Rishon said, that's why we say the shir shliyim on Friday. Hashem malach gayis lavish, that the Eibishter is king over the world. So immediately Adam Rishon, on the day he's created, begins to reveal Malchus. Al derech zo b'chol shana v'shana. The same thing happens every single year, says Chassidus. Shebayim the Rosh Hashanah am shachas b'chines Malchus memkeira al yidei Yisrael. That what happens every year in Rosh Hashanah, every year on the day of Rosh Hashanah, we draw down and reveal the Eibishter's Malchus from its original source. How? Through Yidden that are called Adam. That's why throughout all of the tefillas of Rosh Hashanah, the theme that we keep on finding is the Eibishter's kingship, asking the Eibishter to be king over the world. And that starts right away from the beginning, meaning it's not just connected, you might think, to Tchias Shefer. No, because it starts right away at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah and already in Ma'ariv. Why? Because the whole essence of Rosh Hashanah is drawing down Malchus and building up Malchus. What does that mean? Before to become a Mekaymis Mashma, based on what's explained in several places in Likutei Torah and elsewhere, it implies that what's the connection of Rosh Hashanah to Binyan Malchus, to drawing down Malchus, is Rosh Hashanah because since Rosh Hashanah is the day although it's the day of Brei Adam Rishon, but nonetheless it's the day that's being nischadish, that's drawing down a new light into Ma'aseh Bereishis, into the original acts of creation, which is why it's called Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. That's why it's connected to Amshachas HaMalchus, because the Ma'aseh Bereishis is Achidush T'Klalos Eilumis V'Savusam Liyesh. Ma'aseh Bereishis is the renewal of the entire, what happens on Rosh Hashanah every year? It renews Ma'aseh Bereishis, meaning it renews the entire existence of the worlds and bringing them into being, making them into something. Since on Rosh Hashanah there's a renewal of Ma'aseh Bereishis, therefore we have to draw down Malchus on Rosh Hashanah. Why? How were the worlds brought into being from Malchus? So you have to bring down Malchus again every year on Rosh Hashanah, because every year on Rosh Hashanah you're renewing Ma'aseh Bereishis. However, the Rebbe says we have to understand this explanation more. Why? Because it's not just Malchus that's used to create the world. And if the point is that for Chidush HaIlamis you have to draw down again what was involved in bringing the worlds into being, that's not just Malchus. To bring the world into being, you needed all of the 6 midas. Like it says, or 7 midas. Like it says, that the Eibishter made Shamayim and Aretz in 6 days. V'yodua, we know the Sheish Yamim Kayal Sheish Amidas Shemen Nasu Shamayim V'Aretz. What is the Sheishes Yimei HaBinyan? The 6 days of creation are the 6 midas from Chesed through Yisait. That they're the way in which the Eibishter created heaven and earth. The Chol Yom of Yom of Davidite, that each day did its purpose, fulfilled its role. But if that's the case, even though to create the world you need all of the midas, yet we don't emphasize all of the midas in Rosh Hashanah. What do we emphasize? Just drawing down Malchus. That implies that it's not just because of Chidush Ma'aseh Bereishis. There's another connection of Malchus to Rosh Hashanah. Furthermore, in Malchus there's 2 aspects. The element of Malchus that relates to creation, that relates to bringing the worlds into being, is primarily the fact that Malchus relates to Dibur, to speech, and the Eibishter used the utterances that Asara Maamaris to create the world. The 10 utterances with which the Eibishter created the world. But the emphasis on Rosh Hashanah is Lo Yalin Dibur, the Malchus isn't emphasizing the speech contained in Malchus, which is one element of Malchus, which is the element of Malchus that relates primarily to creation, but rather Kimal Inyan Melucha. In Malchus, there's the aspect that Malchus is speech, as opposed to the higher ones that are Machshava and so on. But there's also an element in Malchus that's Malchus literally, the fact that the Eibishter is Melech. What do we emphasize on Rosh Hashanah? Not the inyan of Dibur that the Eibishter spoke and the world came to be, which would be the aspect of Malchus that relates to creation of the world, but rather the emphasis seems to be on the Melucha, on the literal being king. Melech halaylam kulay, Melech HaKol Haaretz. So we're emphasizing the Melucha aspect, which if the point is Chidush of Ma'aseh Bereishis, we're emphasizing the wrong aspect of Malchus. So we ask, first of all, why don't we emphasize all the other midas if the point is Chidush Ma'aseh Bereishis? Secondly, even in Malchus, we seem to be focusing on the wrong part of Malchus. And even when you talk about the Dibur of Malchus, almost all of the Maamaris with which the world was created are on the first five days of creation before Rosh Hashanah. Also, even more than that, most of them are before the 6th day of creation, before Rosh Hashanah. B, they're not just then, in 6 Sheishes Mei Bereishis. The Maamaris with which the Eibishter created the world are constantly, every single moment, giving life to the world. Like the famous Maamar, the Torah, the Baal Shem Tov, of Leilam Hashem Dvar Chanitza Bashamayim, that the Asar Maamaris with which they were created the world are constantly there at every moment, giving life to creation. If that's the case, what are we emphasizing in Rosh Hashanah? The Chiddush of Malchus. As it says, the Eibishter renews in his goodness every single day the Ma'aseh Bereishis. And as the Alter Rebbe emphasizes, that isn't just B'chol Yom every day, but b'chol rega v'rega b'chol yom tamid, constantly every day. This is happening every single moment. If the reason why we're focusing on Malchus and Rosh Hashanah is because of the Chiddush of Ma'aseh Bereishis, but that aspect of Chiddush of Ma'aseh Bereishis is every single moment. So why are we emphasizing Amshachas HaMalchus and Binyan HaMalchus specifically as it relates to Rosh Hashanah? So, right, so we have two questions on the assumption or the explanation that Binyan HaMalchus and Rosh Hashanah is connected to the fact that on this day there's a renewal of all of Ma'aseh Bereishis, because if so, first of all, what about the other midas? Second of all, we're focusing on the wrong aspect of Malchus. We should be focusing on the Dibur of Malchus, not on the Malchus of Malchus. And thirdly, most of the Maamaris were actually before Rosh Hashanah and continue after Rosh Hashanah, continue every single moment. So why are we emphasizing on Rosh Hashanah specifically Amshachas HaMalchus? The Rebbe says you could explain. Why is there Binyan HaMalchus on Rosh Hashanah? Shayich ze be'ikr lezeh Rosh Hashanah ze Hayom Hamshachas Atzmas Erin Seif b'chinez zeh. This is connected to specifically the element of Rosh Hashanah that we're talking about in this Maamar, the fact that we're able to be mamshich zeh on Hayom, that on Rosh Hashanah we draw down Atzmas Erin Seif. By the way, before we get into explaining this, what it means that the inyan of Zeh, of drawing down Atzmas Erin Seif, is connected somehow to Binyan HaMalchus and Rosh Hashanah, he says that's not separate from the other interpretation that Chiddush of Ma'aseh Bereishis is the reason why Rosh Hashanah is connected to Binyan HaMalchus. Why? What's the connection of the Zeh with Chiddush Ma'aseh Bereishis? Because we know what is explained in the Siddur V'Shara Tkiyas Tivramas Lavinin Tkiyas Shefer Al Pi Kavanas Abal Shem Tev Sam. Tezeh Sheberosh Hashanah Nasa Chidush Techol Seder Shtalshlus Beikar B'Pnimius Eilim is this, that in Rosh Hashanah there's a renewal of all of Seder Shtalshlus, is primarily not in the externality, meaning the world as we see it, but rather in the Pnimius, the true Chayas of the world. Ella Shal Yidei Zeh Nasa Chidush Gam Chitzenius Eilim is Shalei Yibay Fin Derifin Yadayim. And this, that there's also a renewal in the chayas of chitzenius of the world as we relate to it, is only a secondary, because there's a chiddush in pnimius eilemis, there's a chiddush also chitzenius eilemis, so that it shouldn't be on a lower level, it shouldn't be like it's fallen behind. If that's the case, that the primary chiddush of Ma'aseh Bereishis on Rosh Hashanah is in Pnimius HaElemis, then it makes sense, these two different explanations about the connection of Binyan HaMalchus and Rosh Hashanah. The first one that we said before, Shabbat Rosh Hashanah Achidish L'Ma'aseh Bereishis, that Binyan HaMalchus on Rosh Hashanah is connected to the fact that this is a day that renews all of Ma'aseh Bereishis. V'Shabbat Rosh Hashanah Amshachas B'chinazeh, and the one that we're about to explain in this Maamar, that it's connected specifically to the fact that Rosh Hashanah is drawing down the level of Zeh. Why? Because if you're talking about not a Chiddush in Eilemis as we know them, but a Chiddush in Pnimius Eilemis, the Chiddush in Pnimius Eilemis is related to the level of Zeh. In other words, it's related to Erin Seif the way it is higher than Eilam Amilui Nivra, the way it is from Zeh Keli Van Veo, from the Ein Seif that's Mushish and Atzmos Erin Seif that's higher than the Agbalas of Eilam. So we haven't yet explained what that is, why the Zeh being drawn down on Rosh Hashanah makes it connected to Binyan HaMalchus, but just knowing that it's connected to that will explain already why we're emphasizing, because if it's Chiddush Ma'aseh Bereishis, we ask that we should be emphasizing the union of Dibur in Malchus, and yet what we see is that we emphasize the Melucha in Malchus, and not the Dibur in Malchus, but that makes sense if it's connected connected to the fact that in Rosh Hashanah there's a gili of zeh. Why? Because the idea of binyan malchus, in other words, drawing down malchus back from its original source, its original root, relates to this idea of zeh hayom, of being mamshech atzmas seif into the world. Why? Even though it's true that all spheres ultimately their amshacha comes from atzmos, like it says ki mimcha akel, that everything's coming mimcha, everything's coming from the Eibishter. Certainly when you talk about the dibur of malchus, in other words, the asar mamaris that the Eibishter used to create the world ex nihilo from something to from nothing to something, that has to be directly moshe shenatzmos. Why? Because creating something from nothing is something that only Atzmas can do. So it has to be Mimcha Akel, because only the Eibishter himself is the one who is able to create something from absolute nothingness. Nonetheless, nonetheless, the Hamshacha, drawing down Atzmas Erin Seif, the Zeh, into the world, which is the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah, as we've explained so far in the Maamar, is primarily connected to the binyan, specifically to binyan Malchus and the Melucha aspect of Malchus, not the Dibur aspect of Malchus, more so than to all the other spheres. Okay, so in Ois Ches we said we're going to explain based on Hayom Tchilas Maasecha the relationship to the fact that Rosh Hashanah is binyan Malchus. That generally is explained that it has to do with Chiddush Ma'aseh Bereishis that happens on Rosh Hashanah, but that doesn't seem to fully explain why we're focusing on the Melucha aspect of Malchus. And what about the fact that it's Ma'aseh Bereishis or B'chol Yom Tamid? And what about the fact that most of the Maamaris were before? And what about the fact that all of the midas are needed in order to create the world? So he explained that there's a deeper element, that Binyan Malchus and Rosh Hashanah is connected to the Zeh aspect of Rosh Hashanah. But how? So that'll explain in his test. V'yuvan Zeh will understand this. Al piyam b'vor b'derusha Rabbi saying in the Sieno, according to what's explained in the Maamarim of the Rabbeim, b'inyan ha'hefresh shebei midas ha'malchus l'shar ha'midas, in a core difference that exists between Malchus and all other midas. D'yesh leimer the nekudas b'yor meilu. You could say that the nekuda of all of these different explanations that are given in the differences between Malchus and other midas, he kamei shekas k'veit shesmuch admar b'divrei maschal shefer Rosh Hashanah, is summed up in a Maamar of the Friedrich Rebbe, that he says shemidas hamalchus chaluka mikol hamidas b'sharsha, that midas hamalchus is separate from all other midas, first of all in its root, b'mahusa, in its essence, uva'ofen b'metzios mahusa, in the manner of its essence, the existence of its essence, b'hisayrusa, and the way you're ma'eder, the way you awaken it, uva'ofen is hayrusa, and the way it and the manner in which it's awakened, b'hisgalusa, in its revelation, uva'ofen is galusa, and the manner in which it's revealed. What does that mean? So we're going to go through each step. Achiluk b'shar shahu. The difference between Malchus and all the other spheres in its root is the chol amidus uspheres klulim ba'arich anpin umidus hamalchus mishreshas beradla bereishad leisyada. The difference in its source and its root is all other midas, all other spheres are rooted in Keser, in Chitzeni Keser, in Arich Anpin. But Malchus is Mushish and Reishad Leisyada. What does that mean? Pnimi is Keser, which is Atik, has Gimel Reish in the Atik. There's the three heads of Atik, and the highest of those is Reishad Leisyada, the head that is not known. And the difference in the sheirish of the spheres is that all the other midas and not the spheres, their sheirish is in Keser, and Chitzein is a Keser and Arich, and the sheirish of Malchus is in Reishad Leisyada. We'll get back to what that means in a moment, or how that influences the other aspects. The difference in its essence and the manner of its essence, the mitzias, the existence of its essence, is shekol amidus usviris gam kamayishem b'sharsha mubchinas arich him tesnaheden. All of the other midas and sviris, even the way they are in their root in Keser, in Chitzenis Keser and Arich, they're still tesnaheden, they're 9 lights, which I believe means that their kolol, each one has an expression of what it is, and it includes all 9 of them. Umidas malchus rak nekudo b'bechinas lemetzius. Malchus, on the other hand, its mohus is different than the other ones. The other ones are a mohus of 9 lights. In other words, the mohus, their essence is an expression, even the way they're rooted in their source. Their essence is an expression of a particular light, a particular expression, a particular revelation. Whereas malchus, its essence is a nekuda, a point. But bechinas lemetzius, a lack of existence. So the very existence, the essence of the sphira, 9 spheres, each of them are something. Malchus isn't anything. Its whole essence is lack of existence, is nekuda. The difference in the way you awaken, in its awakening and the way in which you awaken it, and its revelation, is the chol hamidis usfiris meseririm gama atzmam. All other midis, all other spheres, they could awaken themselves. In other words, chesed wants to express itself, and therefore it looks for something to be mischesed with, etc. Ulachein eifen isayirusam ulgam medavar sheine be'erkom. V'chein is galusam mama sheine be'erkom klal. Since they could be awakened themselves, they don't require the other to awaken them. So therefore, the way in which they're awakened could be from something that's not ba'erech b'chlal, that doesn't relate to them at all, because it doesn't have to do with the thing that's awakening them. They're self-activating. Since they're self-activating, therefore, the way in which they're awakened and their revelation could be on something that's not, it could be awakened by something that's not Be'erkam, and it could be revealed on something that's not comparable, not on the level of the Svira whatsoever. Malchus is different than those two. Malchus could only be awakened by something else. It could only be activated by an outside element, by another. And because it could only be activated by another, since the activation is coming from the outside, so therefore the activator matters. And the way in which it could be awakened is only from something that's comparable, that's on its level. And the revelation of Malchus could only be on something that's on its level, something that's comparable to it. As we'll see soon, in Melech B'layam, the has to be Tefes Makim. That's the differences we dealt with the difference in its root, in its mohus, in the eifen of its mohus, in the hisayrus, in the eifen of the hisayrus, in the hiskalos. The difference between Malchus and other spheres and the way in which they're revealed is the way in which all the other spheres express themselves. The hashpa, the revelation, is in a way of closeness. In other words, it's revealed. What enables chesed to give to another? Because there's a relationship between them. So the hashpa, when you see chesed being revealed, the manner of its revelation is that it feels a closeness to what it's giving to between mashpia and mekabel, and therefore you feel the svira, you feel the midah. V'cheinu b'hashpa d'chol midas. That's not just by chesed, but it's by all midas. Afilu b'hashpa d'midas ha'gvura, even gvura, which inherently seems to be distance, discipline, but hu mitzad hergish ha'shaychus v'akirov. The revelation of the discipline, the revelation of the gvura, is because there's a relationship, a connection, a bond, a comparability between the giver and the recipient, between the midah and what it's being revealed upon. So therefore it's able to be revealed. It's being revealed in a manner of kiruv. Malchus, though, the manner of its revelation is also different than the other spheres. Because in Malchus, the way it's mashpia, the way it gives, the way it's revealed is through distance. Because the whole essence of Malchus is that it's uplifted, it's exalted, it's separate from the recipient. So all the other spheres are awakened. The manner in which they're revealed is that they have a connection with whatever they're giving to, whatever they're being mashpia to. The way in which Malchus is revealed is that it's distant from whatever it's giving to. V'nei hasiba l'chol chilukim elu shebein midas hamalchus l'shar hamidis hu achiluk shebeneim b'sharsham. Says the Rebbe, it's not just that there happens to be all of these many different distinctions between Malchus and the other spheres, but rather they're all essentially one and the same. The reason why you have all of these differences between Malchus and other Sfiris is because of the original one, because of the difference in their roots. Why? The Malchus Radla Bereshad Le'Yada. The Bechinis Radla Hu Loirak Reshad Le'Yada Lagam Reshad Le'Yada. She'ene b'Mohus Yodua Gam La'atzmai. Since the root of Malchus, we said, isn't in Arach, it's in Reshad Le'Yada, which means the head that is not known. It's not just that it's not known, but it also doesn't know. In other words, it's not known even to itself. Its essence is outside of knowledge, outside of knowability. It can't be known. Therefore, therefore, even when it's drawn down, even the way in which it reveals itself, the way in which it expresses itself, in other words, all those additional aspects that we said, Mahusa, its essence and the manner of its essence, and its mitzius, mitzius Mahusa, the existence of its essence. Therefore, when it's drawn down, what is its essence? Its essence is a lack of existence, as opposed to all the other ones that are in existence because of its root. And also, for that very reason, because it's rooted in Reshad Le'Yada, that isn't knowable, that's a lack of existence. Therefore, even the way it comes in Amshacha, it's in Loi Mitzios, and how could it be awakened? Not through itself, it can't be self-activated. It needs to be activated by another. Why? And for that reason also, if it's able to be self-activated, then it doesn't need a zulas that relates to it, that's on its level, because the recipient doesn't matter at all. It's all about the giver. But since in the case of Malchus, it needs a Zulas to activate it, so therefore the Zulas has to be on its level. It has to be somehow comparable to it. V'hainu, that means the chol amidis mikiven shetzam amida v'gam yiseirusa ma'odam atzmai. In all of the other midas, since the essence of the midah and the way in which the midah is awakened, even when the midah is awakened, but this is from the person himself. Ukamay midas hachesed v'rachamim sheshaychim gam yiseirushulem gam belizulas, like we said, chesed and rachamim, that be'etzem they relate. That's part of the person, the chesed and the rachamim, and therefore they themselves and even their hiseirush, their awakening, can be without a zulas. He's looking for somebody to do kindness to. He's looking for somebody to have mercy to, because that's his nature, that's his self. Therefore, it doesn't really matter what is the thing that he's doing chesed to, or what is the thing that he's having rachmanis on, because they're not what's activating him. He's self-activated. This exists within himself already. And therefore the Zulas isn't ma'akiv. It doesn't have to be be'erkei. You could have a midah of rachmanis or of chesed towards an animal that isn't comparable on the level of the person whatsoever, because it's not about the thing that you're expressing it to. The thing is just the way in which you're expressing it, but it's self-activated and it doesn't need a Zulas, so therefore the Zulas doesn't have to be be'erkei. But when you talk about the midah of Malchus, since the Malchus only comes about as a result of the other, it's not existing in itself, because its essence is loy mitzios, its essence is a lack of existence, and therefore it doesn't really exist in the person, so therefore it can't be revealed from the person himself. It needs something else to be ma'ared it needs something else to call it out, and since it needs to it's coming about only because of that something else. Therefore, that Azulas, that other that's awakening the Malchus, that's causing the person to feel an expression of Malchus, and the other that the Malchus is going to be revealed upon, has to be on his level. Because otherwise, there's nothing outside that's awakening the Malchus, and Malchus is like Metzios, it's no existence within himself, so therefore it won't express itself. It can only be expressed as a result of another, so the other has to be Be'erkei. And that's why Melucha Shayeches Raka Min Adam V'Le'al Ba'alei Chayim. That's why you can only be king over other people that are something that's Be'erkei, something that's on your level. You can't be king over animals. Also, you need that the zulas should be separated from him. You can't have a king without a people. You can't be king over your own family, over your own children, because they're your children, and therefore there's not shaykh, the whole union of melucha. Melucha is shaykh only when there's a zulas, and when the zulas is be'erkei. And that's connected also to the final difference between Malchus and the other Sfiris. That the manner in which Malchus is revealed, we said the Malchus, that all the other Midas are revealed in a manner of Kirov, but Malchus is revealed in a manner of distance, in a manner of Richok. Because again, since it's V'gaminyin zeh, again, even this aspect that the hashpa of malchus is specifically and in a manner of separation, of exaltedness, of distance, it also relates to what we said, to the sherish of malchus. That the sherish of malchus is in reisha d'leis yada, kinyanis nasos al amba mitzades nasos atzmis. Because since reisha d'leis yada is loy mitzios, it's uplifted above the person. It's not part of the person. It's not expressed in the person's messias. So therefore, it itself, the midah itself, is in a manner of isnasos. It's essentially exalted. It's essentially removed from the person. Berichok, but distance from the person, because it's not knowable. And since it's a distance from him, therefore the way it's expressed on a people is also no manner of distance. Okay, so in this case we explained that Malchus is essentially different from all other midas because it's rooted in Reisha D'Leis Yada, not just in Arich. And since it's rooted in Reisha D'Leis Yada, its whole existence is lack of existence, and, as opposed to all the other spheres. And therefore, the way in which it's expressed is in a manner that its essence is lack of existence. It's the way in which it's awakened is from something outside of it, and it doesn't need to be it needs to be be'erechit because it needs to be awakened by something outside from it. So therefore it needs to be be'erkei, and the way in which it's revealed is in a manner of distance. All of these are expressions of the core difference that it's rooted in Reisha D'Leis Yada rather than being rooted in Arich. So now that we understand what Malchus is and how Malchus is different than other spheres, and based on that we understand that that the whole idea of Melucha could only be on a people, on something separate. It's be'erkei, but it's also separate from him, as opposed to over children. So with this Yuvan, with this we'll understand. Normally we think of Vinu Malkeinu. The higher level is Avinu, the lower level is Malkeinu. But from here we see that the fact that Yidden are the Eibishter's people has, in a certain aspect, an advantage over even the fact that we're his children. Why? It's only because we're his people that the Eibishter is able to be Melech Yisrael. What do you mean? The whole idea of Melech Yisrael is that the Eibishter is uplifted over us. We said Malchus is in a manner of isnasos, of exaltedness. It's distant, it's separation. So you would think that Melech Yisrael is a separation from the Yidden, not a connection to the Yidden. Nonetheless, this exaltedness isn't because of their distance from him, it's from the essential exaltedness, like we said before, the essential upliftedness and distance. Zeu Mashakasov, he says, this is what it says in the pasuk. V'anachnu amcha v'tzayin marisecha. We are your people, we say to the Eibishter, and the sheep that you shepherd. V'isa b'medrash al pasuk deidi livani loy hareya b'shanim. So it says in the medrash on the pasuk, deidi livani loy, my beloved is to me and I am to him. Hareya b'shanim, who pastures, who shepherds among the roses. So the medrash says, hu li lav ani loy leben, hu li l'reya v'ani l'tzayin. The Eibishter is my father, I am his son. The Eibishter is my shepherd, I am his sheep. Now, says the Rebbe, 1 second. Think about this a second. If being my father and I am his son is higher than him being my shepherd and me being his sheep, then it would just say that and stop there. So mizeh shebetchila imer hu li lav v'ani le leben v'ach kach meisef hu li l'reya v'ani le l'tzayin. The fact that the Medrash says first that the Eibishter is my father, I'm his son, but after that it still adds that he is my shepherd, I'm his sheep. Muvan de'inyin hu li l'reya hu l'may le'yeser me'inyin hu li lav. Obviously, at least in one aspect, there's an advantage of hu li l'reya v'ani le l'tzayin over hu li lav v'ani le leben, because otherwise why bother saying a second thing? כידוע, דעניין הוא לי לרעי ואני לציינו, בכנס גם בן ואח אין לי. So, as is known, that it says in Eira Teira, that's in Maamar and Samach Tzedek, that this inyan of Huli L'Raya, that he's my shepherd and I'm his sheep, is in the level of Gam Ben Ve'ach Ein Lai, like the pasuk says, that he has no son, he has no brother. It's some level that's higher than that. If that's the case, if Tzayin and Raya is in a certain sense a higher relationship because it's a higher level of God, a level that we can't reach through Avinu, a level that we can't reach through being our father, and there's a certain connection that's even deeper than Av and Ben. So if that's the case, we say in the pasuk Amcha v'tzei Marisecha, we're your people and your sheep that you pasture and that you shepherd. In other words, the Amcha also being the Eibishter's nation is now leYeser Mizeshi Yisrael and of Yisbarach also has an advantage, even above the level of being the Eibishter's children. Why? What do you mean? Avinu seems to be a much higher level. But mikivan shein melech b'lo am, since, as we said, you can't have a king without a people. Hari nimsa dezeh shakadosh baruch hu melech Yisrael udafke mitzad zeh Yisrael emam Yisbarach. The Yidden's existence is the only thing that allows the Eibishter to be melech Yisrael, so to speak, to be the king of Yisrael. Ki inyan harei memus v'isnasos ukenam mitzad zeh shu merei memunusa be'etzem, because the Eibishter's this exalted level of Melech Yisrael comes from that essential exaltedness and is only possible if there's something that's be'erkai but distance from him, and is only possible through the Yidden. וזהו שעיקר ההדגשה בראש השנה והתפילת ראש השנה ובעניין המלכות, כי החידוש בראש השנה הוא כ"ה באלול, זה היום הוא כנ"ל שנשמע ישראל, ששר שמו בכנס צור הלם שאינו במציאות ממשיך עם גילי עצמוס אין סייף, ושרש המלכות בראש דלייס ידה בכנס הלם שאינו במציאות, ולמעלה יסר בכנס רעים ומסע עצמוס. It says the level of Av and Ben of Avinu, that's a level that's shaykh to us, that's a level that we relate to, that we're somehow connected with. The level of Melech is one that's exalted, essentially, that's uplifted, that's removed beyond the world. That's exactly what we said at the beginning of the Maamar. The whole Maila of Rosh Hashanah over Chafei Elul, Zeh over Kai, is that Nishmis Yisrael, whose Sheirish of Surah Zehelim Sheina Mitzias is something that's at a distance, that's being brought into existence in a way that it didn't even exist in the first place, are able to draw down Atzma Seirin safe and are able to draw down the essence of the Eibishter as he is completely beyond any level that could have been revealed even in Olam HaMilui Nivra. That relates to Binyan HaMalchus, because the Sheirish of Malchus is in Reisha D'Leis Yada, is that same Helam Sheinim Mitzios, and is what brings out in the Eibishter the idea of Melech, because of the Hireimemus and Isnasos Be'etzem. In other words, Binyan HaMalchus is Hayom Tchilas Masecha. Binyan HaMalchus is tapping into the level of godliness that's completely and totally beyond being expressed in the world, and that only is expressed in the world through Avedas Adam, through the Yidden's existence, through being Amcha. Okay, so we explained that we answered the question of Binyan HaMalchus, why Binyan HaMalchus is connected to Rosh Hashanah, not just the element of Chidush Ma'aseh Bereishis, but that it's connected to the idea of Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. Why? Because once you understand what Malchus is rooted in Reisha D'Leis Yada, and therefore comes down in a manner of Richuk, because it relates to Isnasos Be'etzem, so then that is Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maasecha, the fact that Yidden, through their Aveda, have the Kayach to draw down Atzmas Ein Seif into the world in a way that didn't exist in Kai, that didn't exist even in the way of Chafei Elul of Elam HaMilui Nivra. That is Binyan HaMalchus. Amnam, Yud Aleph. He says, Amnam Adayin Tzarech Lavin, but we still have a question. Why? We're saying now as if only Malchus comes from Radla, right? And all the other Sfiris are rooted in Arich. He says, but 1 second, all the Sfiris originally, where did Arich come from? Its Sheirish is in Atik, which Sheirish is in the highest, in the Gimoration Atik, which Sheirish is in Reishad Leis Yada. That means all the Sfiris ultimately are rooted in Radla. This that we say that all the other Sfiris, except for Malchus, are included in Arich, are expressed in Arich, that's that they're drawn from Reishad Leis Yada into eventually into Arich. Aval shar shamarishin gam desviras elu hu bereishad leis yada ulamali yeister admats musi yisbarach meshkasum michakel. But ultimately, the original root of these sviras is also in reishad leis yada. Not only that, even higher. Ultimately, the root of everything is in atzmas. We said before, kimim chakel. Everything comes from the Eibishter, comes from atzmas of the Eibishter. The whole Kayach of Esavos is only in Atzmos Yisbarach. Since on Rosh Hashanah everything's reverting to its original state, if that's the case, then in their original state on Rosh Hashanah, all of the midas, all of the sfiris are being drawn not from the lower levels that they were drawn later into, but from their original root and source. And what's their original root and source? Ultimately, it's Atzmos. If that's the case, then every Rosh Hashanah we're connecting all of the Sfiris again to their original roots. So Taka, we said before, Hayom, Tchilas, Maasecha, the revelation of Atzmos in the world is expressed primarily in Malchus, but the way they are in their original source, in their original state, it's true of all Sfiris. So why do we emphasize Malchus and Binyan Malchus? So the Rebbe says you could explain the hefresh ben sviris amalchus l'shara sviris mashenegea kan hu behatachlis shalem. That ultimately the difference between malchus and the other sviris, as it relates here, the primary point, is not just in all these differences we talked about, but in what their purpose is. What does that mean? Because we know Shatsolas Kolas Sviris Tatzilos Hi Bechdei Sheyi Al Yodam Gili Elokus Bebia Ad Lamata Beilamaza Gashmi. Ultimately, the purpose of why all of the Sviris of Atzilus were brought into existence, were emanated from the Eibishter's essence, is so that through them there should be able to be a revelation of godliness into the lower worlds, into Bia. And what's the purpose of that? Ultimately, till Lamata Beilamaza Gashmi, this lowest world, sheitacht lamata mimenu, shenishmis Yisrael kamei sheim belubashes beguf Gashmi yuchadim atzmos. That the ultimate point is that nishmis Yisrael, the way they're enclosed in a physical body, in the physical world, should still be one with atzmos. Shemebchines hachachma da'atzilas she'ikar atzilas nimshach lamata inyan hachachma yedias v'asagas elokus. In other words, each one of the spheres expresses itself. Why? So that idea could be expressed in our relationship with God. So the point of chachma of atzilus, with all of its hafla, everything that it is, the point of chachma of atzilus is so that from there should be drawn all the way down into lamata in elam haza agashmi, that we have chachma. In other words, we have the ability to know and comprehend godliness, and that's the point of the Sfiras HaChachma. The same is true of all the Sfiras, that the point of Bina is that we could use it to understand godliness. The point of Chesed is we could use it, etc. If that's the case, yes, we asked Taka in the root, in the original root, all Sfiris ultimately are rooted in the same place. But if you're looking at their Tachlis, the way they come down in Eilam Gashmi, in that you see the advantage of Malchus over all the other Sfiris. And that's why we focus on Rosh Hashanah and Binyan Malchus. Why? Shagam b'ham shachasa lamata, hi ba'oisei ha'oifen kefishi, hi b'shar sharishin, b'bchinis reishad. All the other Sfiris, there is Taka the way they are in their original source, but then they came down into Arich, and from there into the Sfir and Atzilus, and from there lower and lower and lower, because they're in a Mitzias. And the way they are in Reishad Leis Yada, the way they are in Atzmus, obviously is not as a Mitzias. So that means that the way they came down here, which is their ultimate Tachlis, isn't the way they were in the way they were Moshish in their Shadish. But the call Shara Sviras, all of the other Sviras, Mikivan Shenyana Mushem Nahirim Gilui, since their whole Inyan, the way they come down here in this world is to be revealing a particular, to express a particular aspect, a particular attribute. Dagam Sheshar Shamarishan Beresha Leis Yadari Lachriam Shachas Muchinas Arich Him Nahirim Bezau Inyana, because even though their root is in Reisha Leis Yada, and obviously the way they're included in Reisha Leis Yada and higher than that in Atzmos, they have no mitzias. But Lapayel, they're Hamshach, they're Nimshach, then into Arich. And from then, they're Nahid, they're lights. In other words, they're revealing a particular aspect, and that's their whole inyan. Zeu inyanam, that's their point, is to reveal the light, to reveal that particular character trait, that particular aspect. Therefore, the way they ultimately come down into this world is that Chachma is Megala Chachma, Bina is Megala Bina. They're expressing a particular thing, because that's their whole point. Their whole point, the way their nimshach is to be nahedin, is to be a gilui. Mashenkin Sfiras HaMalchus. Malchus is the one exception. Why? Because in Yano b'chinas nekuda b'chinas leimetzias. Because, like we said before, the whole inyan of Malchus is a nekuda, is a lack of existence. V'gam b'hamshachasa b'adargi shelamata meradla. So Itzu Taka is drawn down into lower levels. It doesn't remain the way it is in Radla, in Reishat Leis Yada, even though we said it's Sherish is there. But even the way it's drawn down into the levels that follow, b'chinas mohuso, b'chinas mitzias mohuso, b'chinas eseirusa, b'chinas eifenis arusa, b'chinas eskalu, like we said before, in all aspects, in its essence and the existence of its essence, the manner of its essence, its awakening, the manner of its awakening, its revelation, the manner of its revelation, all the details that we explained in the previous ACS about the difference of Malchus. Even all of those, it's still being expressed in a manner of leimetzias, in a manner of lack of existence, the same way that it was in its original source in Radla. The other Sviras are rooted in Radla, but the way they come down, they're expressed as an expression, because that's their whole point. Malchus is rooted in Radla, and the way it comes down remains the way it's rooted in Radla, that its whole existence is a lack of existence. Even the way it's nimshach all the way into the lowest levels, into Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, remains in the same manner, that it feels its root, it feels the atzmos, and therefore remains a lack of existence, remains bittul. Because even though Taka, the way Malchus is revealed, is Vakert, is as Malchus, is as kingship, exaltedness over the people, meaning it seems to be an expression. But nonetheless, like we said before, where does that isnasus come from? From its root. From the fact that Atzmos is exalted and uplifted and beyond anything, and it's mamshich Atzmos, therefore even the way it is down here is in a manner of richok, in a manner of distance. So that's why we focus on Malchus, not on the other midas, on Binyan Malchus and Rosh Hashanah, not on the other midas, because the point isn't that, it's rooted in Reishad Leis Yada. Yes, the other ones are also rooted in Reishad Leis Yada. The point is that Malchus, even the way it's rooted, even the way it comes down here, the tachlis, the purpose of it, which is to be revealed, it's revealed in a manner of lack of mitzias, and therefore it remains the way it's rooted in Reishad Leis Yada, and therefore on Rosh Hashanah, since Rosh Hashanah is about Hayom, Tchilas, Maasecha, about tapping into not just Kai, not just the world the way it is, Milui Nivra, but to Hayom, to the Atzmos that remains higher than the world, that's beyond any limitation of the world. So therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, we focus on Binyan HaMalchus. And that's why within Malchus itself, what do we focus on? Not the speech element of Malchus, but rather the Malchus element, the Melucha aspect of Malchus. Why? Because the speech aspect of Malchus, although though it's also included in Malchus, because it's bibitl to Machshava and so on, nonetheless, it's expressed in a manner that it exists, that it could be different. There's one thing you say, there's a different thing you say. So there's separations between it. As explained, that speech is already separation. Kail shefer, the kail sound, is without separation yet, it's not divided yet. It then comes into the Isis. Malchus, on the other hand, is whole essence, is a lack of existence. And the whole Reimamus, the whole exaltedness of Malchus, is an expression of the Reimamus, the exaltedness, the upliftedness of Atzmos, of its source. Therefore, we emphasize the Melucha aspect of Malchus on Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is Hayom, Tchilas, Maasecha. The whole point of Rosh Hashanah is to draw down the Atzmos, the way it is higher than the world, into the world. So this is the meaning of Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. For Rosh Hashanah Yom Vav L'Maaseh Bereishis, even though the world was created on the 25th day of Elul, Rosh Hashanah is already the 6th day of creation. So if that's the case, why are we celebrating, like we asked at the beginning? Nonetheless, since the whole point of creation was for what? Was the taiva that the Eibishter has to have a dira b'tachteinim. Dira latzmusi yizbarach, and the point is that dira is not just to a level of godliness, but to atzmos. As we know, that what is a home, that's where you're able to express yourself. That's where your essence is found. And the point is that this dwelling place, meaning the revelation of atzmos, should be in this lowest world, that there is no lowest world. Therefore, we don't celebrate Rosh Hashanah on Chafei Elul, because that's the world, that's limitation. The point is to reveal Atzmos, and the only way that we're going to reveal Atzmos, the celebration of Rosh Hashanah, is on the day Adam was created, and the point is that that's Hayom Tchilas Maasecha, that's the day that we're able to bring the Zeh into Maasecha, into the world. Because this intent of creating a Dira B'Tachteinim is achieved by who? By the Aveda Vayit. Atem Kriyim Adam. The Adam is the one who's able to create, to bring about the Dira B'Tachteinim. Why? Like we said before. By doing our Aveda and learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs, which is the Chakli Yisrael Mishpat Lelekei. That's how we do. That's how we achieve within the world. First of all, that it should return to its perfection the way it was at the beginning of creation, before the Yerida, that was before the descent that was caused by the sin of Eitz Hadas. But ultimately the point isn't to bring it back to Milui Nivra, but that it should be on an even higher level than the way it was before creation. That it should be a dira, to be Mamshech Atzmos himself. The essence of the Eibishter himself should dwell within the world. Because through the Aveda Vayid, we're able to create a dira, a dwelling place for the Eibishter's essence in the lower world. In this physical world, that there is no lower world. And that itself, in the lowest aspects within the world itself, as we said, that everything that has been done will know that you did it. In other words, even in the lowest aspects of creation will reveal the essence of the Eibishter. Why? Because when a person does his Aveda and fulfilling the mitzvahs with the power of action that's contained in the person, the lowest aspect of the person, that draws godliness into the lowest aspect of the person, into his guf, and within the body itself, into the Kayach HaMaisa, the power of action. V'hainu nimshach ha'koyach gam b'davar hagashmi, and that doesn't stay just in the person's lowest aspects, because through my actions affecting the world around me, the physical things that we deal with that are outside of the person, then that koyach eliki is drawn also in the koyach ha'maisa of the person, which now is being mega adira for elokus, is being revealed also in the physical object that it's working with. Okay, as we know, Sharava Magid Hikir Bekeli is Kayachamuman, that the Magid was able to see in the Keli the nature of and the power of the craftsman that made it. Kayachapel Banifal, even within physical objects, he could see the acts, the power of the doer, of the creator in the creation, in the act that's done. Even though making a vessel isn't even Yeshmayin, it's not true Bria, it's not true creation. It's just taking something and forming it and making it into another form. Nonetheless, even in that, he was able to see the Kayach HaPayel B'nifal. How much more so are we able to see the Kayach HaPayel of the Eibishter who created everything, Yesh Ma'ayin, in the Nifal and everything that exists. And therefore, not only is the person a dwelling place for the Eibishter, but the physical object, the lowest aspect of the world, is also a dira for the Eibishter. And that's how we fulfill the ultimate purpose, the ultimate intent, that the Eibishter desired to have a dira b'tachteinim. The the Eibishter desire is something that's beyond reason, beyond rationale. As is known, that it's saying the Maamar of the Alter Rebbe, that you can't ask a question on a desire. This is what the Eibishter desired. That means this coming from a level that's higher than Tamvadas. And because the dira b'tachteinim is now being created not only in the person through his aveda, and in the koyach ha'maisa and the lowest aspects of the person, but even in the world and in all the aspects of the world, up to the lowest aspects of the world. That's how the physical object truly becomes a true metzias. Like the Rebbe Marash explains, there were mamarim that each of the Rebbeim would say repeatedly every now and then in order to purify the air of the world. So the Maamar that the Rebbe Marash used to say, he says, that the world and everything that exists within it is a true existence. In other words, you might think that since everything is being brought into existence every moment, and it's only from the Kayach Eliki that's being Mahavit, that means that the world isn't a real existence, it's just our imagination. Said the Rebbe Marash, no, the existence of the world and everything in it is real. It's not just a fake, it's not just an appearance. Or maybe he brings a proof from a psak halacha, from practical halacha, that emphasizes this point. V'hainu, that means even though the yesh is constantly being brought into existence from the ayin, and is batel to the ayin that's giving it life, and therefore you would think it's not a real metzias, nonetheless, it becomes a true metzias. Why? Since everything that exists within creation was brought about from the truth of the Eibishter's existence. Therefore, the existence of everything that exists is the truth of the Eibishter's existence. In other words, we become a real existence because we become a dira le'yizbarach, like we said. Therefore, the metzias of the world becomes a real metzias. As the Mittler Rebbe explains in Biur HaZeir, that the true existence of the physical object, of the physical existence, is the Yesh Amiti, is the true existence of the Eibishter. So the point of this ace is that Hayom tchilas Maasecha, that through the Aveda Sa'adam we're able to bring down the Zeh, we're able to create a dira le'isbarach b'tachteinim, that Nisave HaKadosh Baruch Hu li'is le'dir b'tachteinim. Why? Because by the person doing his Aveda, even in the lowest aspects in the Kayach HaMaisa, and that affects even the lowest aspects of the world, and they all become a dira for the Eibishter, and that's what makes them a true metzias. All of this is achieved through every good action of every single Yid. Like the psak din of the Rambam Shalidei mitzvah achas, that through one mitzvah, whether it's b'machshava mikol shekem b'dibur mikol shekem b'maisa, even a mitzvah in just thought, how much more so when it's in speech and it affects even more, how much more so when it's in action and it affects even more. Machrias, kol ha'olam kulei l'kaf schus, is able to tip the balance of the entire world to the side of schus of merit. The psak din zeh b'meshech kol hashana. That psak din is all year long, that every action has the ability to tip the entire world. Al achas kama v'kama b'Rosh Hashanah. How much more so on Rosh Hashanah? Why? This idea that you're able to tip the entire world to the side of merit is to see the world as equally balanced between good and bad. But at Rosh Hashanah, it's not equally balanced in the first place. Why? Because it says already on Erev Rosh Hashanah, we already know with absolute certainty that will be Zeicha B'din. That's why we prepare a Yom Tov meal. How much more so on Rosh Hashanah, we know this with certainty. Even more so after Tkiyah Shefer. The Chol Shana Sheirasha B'tchilasa Misasheres B'Seifa. As we know, it says that any year that's Rasha B'tchilasa, that's poor at its beginning, the Gemara says, it becomes wealthy at its end. As it continues, what does it mean that it's poor at its beginning? So it says in Maamarim that goes on before the Tkiyah Shefer. Because Shefer represents the Meitzar, the constriction, and from the constriction we call out to the Eibishter. In other words, we go through the Meitzar of the Tkiyah Shefer, and that's the Rasha B'tchilasa. Immediately after that, it becomes wealthy. Why? Because Anani B'merchav, we go from the Meitzar to the Merchav. Ba'er Panecha Ya'alechon, that we go in the light of the Eibishter. B'ksivach Simateva, B'teva Nirav Hanigla, B'chol HaMitzarech, Alachas Kama V'kama B'nyina Ikri, B'yas Mashiach Tzidkeinu, B'meirav Yameinu, Ba'agala Didon Mamash. Okay, so basically the point of the Maamar is Hayom, Tchilas Maasecha. Why is Rosh Hashanah on the day that man is created? Because man, Avedas Adam, is what's able to be mamshich, the able to be mamshich, the gili of atzma and safe, that's higher even than kai, higher than the olam amilui nivra, than the amilui nivra, than the perfection of the world, the way it is lechatchila. The world, the way it is l'chatchila, is already extremely high level. The first day of creation, the Eibishter is Yachid Be'elamai, etc. But the Avedas Adam is even higher because it draws down from higher than Medida V'Agbala altogether. This is expressed in the Neshama. The Neshama is Moshe Shenatzmos, and then the Neshama deals with the Guf. That's the person bringing the Zeh of his Neshama into the Kai of his Guf. And because we're able to bring the Zeh of the Neshama into the Kai of the Guf, therefore we're able to bring the Zeh of Atzmos into the Kai of the world as a whole. And that's Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. How? Ki chak liyisrael hu mishpat lelekei Yaakov, through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And that's the idea that in Rosh Hashanah is Binyan HaMalchus. Because what is Binyan HaMalchus, and why do we focus on Binyan HaMalchus? Why aren't we focused on the other midas? And why are we focused on the Melucha of Malchus? Because the essence of Malchus is that even the way it is down here, it's an expression of loy mitzias, of lack of existence, because it's rooted as still an expression the same way it is in its source in Reisha D'Leis Yada. In other words, it's bringing the unknowable God into the world, and even the hisnasus of Malchus is from the hisnasus of Atzmos, the Rememus of Atzmos. So therefore, the Hayom Tchilas Maasecha, Rosh Hashanah is Binyan HaMalchus, is when we bring the Zeh, is when we bring godliness as is beyond creation down into the world. And that's done through the Aveda of making a dira le'yizbarach b'tachtenim, and through even every action that we do is able to bring about that dira b'tachtenim.